Do you think war is all about shouting, blood, and silence? What if I told you that many times what saved soldiers from death was a well-told joke? No one talks about this in the movies. No ceremony honors the power of a well-placed laugh in the midst of chaos. But the truth that veterans carry in their hearts, is that in many moments laughter was more effective than shooting. Humor was a shield. It was oxygen. It was a bridge between sanity and collapse. Behind the trenches, between the noise of grenades and the weight of fear, there were stories that were never recorded in reports. A frozen soldier saved by a joke. A war paralyzed by a comical phrase on the loudspeaker. An entire platoon breathing together because someone had the courage to tell a silly story in the shelter. This video is not about ordinary laughter. It is about courageous laughter. Laughter that does not deny fears, yet but walks alongside it. You will understand why some soldiers say that the best weapons in war were nicknames, imitations, clandestine radios, and even a chicken. Yes, a chicken. Get ready. This story will make you laugh, yes, but it will make you see humor like never before, as an act of love, of resilience, and above all, of survival. On that freezing night, the silence in the trench was as heavy as the mud that stuck to their boots. The soldiers' eyes scanned the darkness in search of a sound, a movement, any sign that hell was about to break loose. The fear was palpable, the kind that settles deep in the stomach and doesn't ask for permission. And then, between a click on the radio and the grinding of a tooth, someone blurts out, "If we're going to die, at least let it be after dinner." For a second, no one reacts. And suddenly laughter comes, that loose, involuntary laughter, almost a sigh. It was like opening a window in an airless room. For a few minutes, fear gave way to lightness. The silly phrase, said in the heat of fear, became a shield. It became a balm. It was more than a joke. It was a demonstration of love for life, even when it seemed to be slipping through our fingers. The curious thing is that humor in the trenches is not mockery nor denial. It is courage disguised as irony. It is resilience in the form of an inside joke. When everything around us screams of despair, laughter rises up as an act of rebellion. It is like saying, "You can take away our security, our comfort, even our hope for a moment, but you will not take away our humanity." That soldier, by making fun of his own mortality, offered the group something that not even ammunition can offer: emotional fuel. It is at these times that kindness among companions manifests itself in its purest form: a nudge on the shoulder, a knowing look, a smile on the corner of the mouth. All signs that the human spirit, even surrounded by darkness, still knows how to find light. And it is in this gesture that we see the greatness of improvisation, the power of kindness contained in a simple, witty comment. Few understand that sometimes laughing is harder than resisting. It takes more wisdom to see humor in chaos than to survive it. And this silent art of finding lightness in pain, of recognizing that fear is real but does not need to be king, is what separates the survivors from the living. After that night, that phrase became a password. Whenever tension threatened to engulf the platoon, someone would repeat, "After dinner, okay?" It was the code to remind them that, despite their insecurity, there was affection, there was trust, there was humanity between them. And the most incredible thing? None of them knew that they were teaching each other the most powerful art of all, that of laughing when the soul cries for help. And amidst that laughter, right in the middle of the mud, the invisible foundation of an eternal bond was born. On the field, no one called each other by their first name, not out of disrespect, but out of excessive intimacy. It was a kind of secret code, a private language born of forced coexistence and the need to belong. Each nickname carried a story, a moment of emotion, of how a stumble, a poorly executed pickup line, or an act of courage became an eternal symbol between brothers in uniform. Colonel Katsutada, for example, was the guy who would stumble, even in the shadow of a tent, and precisely for that reason, he was the most agile when the ground exploded. The sniper of love had terrible aim, but he hit everyone's heart with his clumsy sincerity and natural kindness. And the human GPS. No one followed him, but everyone protected him, because their value was not in their technique, but in the affection with which they filled the field with laughter. These names did not diminish anyone. On the contrary, they were invisible emblems of those who had conquered their space, not by force, but by inspiration. War is a place where fear shortens names and bonds are made in details. They called the cook alchemist because he could turn any canned food into a banquet. The most stubborn soldier? Woman in uniform, for not retreating even with a grenade in her foot. It was a humor that was loaded with compassion, with subtle recognition, almost a daily forgiveness for the mistakes that everyone made, but preferred to laugh at rather than punish. And in this playful exchange, a brotherhood was born that did not depend on rank or protocol. It was more human, more raw, and much more real. And the most beautiful thing, it was seeing how these nicknames survived the war. Years later, at veterans' meetings, no one remembered positions, only stories. When someone shouted GPS, the group would burst out laughing. There, between a beer and a memory, that longing with a taste of gratitude emerged, because remembering others through laughter is remembering the part that survived, the part that resisted fear, loneliness, pain. And in the end, each nickname was an oral monument to the humanity of that group. It was a daily reminder that behind the uniform there were people with twisted stories, hearts full of affection, and the incredible ability to turn hell into a joke, and the joke into eternity. It was a deep night, the kind that even the moon seems afraid to appear. The patrol advanced slowly along a narrow trail in the middle of the dense forest. Absolute silence. Even breathing was held. A strange sound emerged, quick, dry, coming from the right side. The team froze, guns raised, fingers on the trigger. "There's something there," muttered one of the soldiers, and before anyone could confirm, the unexpected happened. A sharp scream, a stumble, and there came Soldier Beto running wildly toward the group, eyes wide open, shouting, "It's a creature. It has wings." Behind him it's a chicken, that's right. An ordinary chicken, disoriented, pecking and clucking as if it were in its own war territory. For a few seconds, no one knew how to react, until the silence exploded in laughter. A loose, pure laughter, the kind that comes out like an electric shock from the chest. Even the sergeant, known for never laughing at anything, sat down on the side of the trail and cried with laughter. Beto, embarrassed, tried to justify himself. "I thought it was a biological drone." But it was too late. The chicken was given a name, Captain Penosa, and Beto, he became Commander Panico. That story, which could have been just another blank record of a night without progress, became a legend in the platoon. And whenever the tension increased, all someone had to do was say, "Watch out for the chickens, okay?" That was it. The weight would disappear, and the mood would return to control. That scene was not only funny, it was essential. Because on the battlefield, humor becomes emotional survival. It does not nullify the danger, but it gives you the strength to face it with more clarity, more lightness, more humanity. The chicken attack, or rather the attack of fear disguised as a harmless animal, taught the group something powerful, that even in the absurd there is value. That laughter is a form of resilience, and that no one needs to be impenetrable all the time. Being human there was more valuable than any tactical training. And Beto, he never lived without being reminded of the night he proved that even fear can be funny when seen with empathy and a pinch of self-love. On the front lines, time passes differently. A day can last forever and a night can feel like a month. In one of those isolated posts, where the most constant sound was the buzzing of insects and the distant echo of static radios, something unlikely was born, a pirate radio station. No one knows for sure who came up with the idea, but all it took was for one of the operators to find unusable parts and an old tape recorder for the chaos to start getting a soundtrack. They called the program Frequency 51, a mix of alien and despair. There they broadcast inside jokes, imitations of the general, and even parodies of popular songs with lyrics about canned food. It was crude, ridiculous, incredibly necessary. The radio became the heart of the station. At 9 p.m., everyone was tuned in, and if the transmitter failed, someone would shout from the tower, "Hey DJ, where's today's fun?" The anticipation surrounding the program gave purpose to the breaks. Laughter became a shield against loneliness, insecurity, and even the fear of death. There was no censorship, but there was respect. They knew the limit, and they crossed it with love. There was an episode in which they narrated a scorpion, Chorsis, using caricatured sports voices. Another in which they simulated a commercial for combat sunscreen, now with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. It was nonsense, of course, but it healed. And in that environment of constant stress, that touch of sincerity disguised as a joke was a powerful balm. After the mission, some still saved the audios on pen drives. Others transcribed the best edits in an improvised notebook, now framed in a veteran's room. When asked if it made sense, they laugh. Of course not, but it made a difference. Because there on that clandestine radio station, they rediscovered something essential: their voice. Not the formal voice, nor the voice of the commanders, but the voice of humanity. The voice that says, "I'm here with you. And even in this end of the world, we can still laugh." Pirate radio was more than a pastime. It was an act of courage, of hope, and of a rare type of emotional intelligence that only those who live on the edge can have: the ability to understand. That laughing is also fighting. It was dawn. The earth shook with the explosions, and the underground shelters seemed like a cocoon about to collapse. The air was heavy, stifling, charged with tension. No one spoke. Faces were pale, eyes fixed, on nothing. At any moment the world could end in there, and that was when he stood up. Corporal Nito, short, frail, but possessed of a silent courage that few had noticed until then. "Gentlemen, welcome to the worst theater of war on earth." Literally. The first sentence drew a weak laugh, but, he continued, imitations of the commander, jokes about the state of the rations, invented stories about a supposed ghost of the brave platoon. The shelter was transformed. Each laugh was a sign of life. There was no microphone, no stage, no lights, just a flashlight shaking in someone's hand and the sound of bombs in the background. But there, amid jokes and exaggerated gestures, something precious happened. The soldiers' souls breathed. Laughing at that moment was not foolishness. It was perseverance. It was a way of affirming, "We are still here." Nito did not stand up out of vanity. He did it out of collective necessity. It was a kind of comic altruism, a rare gift of giving lightness where there was only weight. And the audience? A brotherhood of survivors, united not only by fear, but now by something much stronger: the ability to smile in the midst of chaos. It was more than humor. It was hope. It was love in the form of a joke. When the bombing stopped, no one said anything. They just looked at each other, shy smiles. Some were crying, with relief, with emotion, with gratitude. Neto sat back down, in silence as if nothing had happened. But everyone knew. That night he saved the sanity of an entire platoon. And that's why he earned a new nickname, the Cave Comedian. Decades later, at veterans' gatherings, they still repeat his phrases, still laugh at his stories. And many say that it was there, in that improvised stand-up, that they understood one of the greatest lessons of war. When fear wants to silence you, laughter can be your most powerful scream. The heat was merciless. The dunes seemed to dance under the tired eyes of the soldiers, and the days, all the same, tested the sanity of even the most resilient. Missions were punctuated by boredom, longing, and silences that were too long. And it was in this arid setting that someone proposed, "Let's have a costume contest." At first there was shy laughter, then curious glances, and soon hands rummaging through boxes of old supplies, decommissioned weapons, pieces of canvas, and torn belts. In a few hours, what had previously been discouragement became a laboratory of creativity. The camouflaged Cupid emerged, with a bow made from antenna cables, the Rambo of the backlands, with fake bullets and a cactus strapped to his shoulder. And the glorious war doctor of the Federal Revenue Service, combining a lab coat with a helmet and sunglasses. The rules? None. It just had to be funny and safe, of course. The prize? A packet of cookies and the honor of seeing their photo printed on the wall of the container. But what they gained was much greater. They laughed like children. They forgot about the pain, the fear, the loneliness. For the first time in days, they took photos of themselves laughing for real. That contest became a ritual. Once a month, they invented characters, created stories, and even held parades among the tents. What was once a simple game became a tool for internal reconciliation. Soldiers who barely spoke to each other now exchanged ideas about costumes. And in the infernal heat, they discovered the freshness of shared affection, of the kindness of making others laugh. Years later, the photos circulate in messaging groups. They are blurry, yellowed, but they carry something that no weapon could provoke: emotion. Because there was more than just fantasy there. There was truth. There was raw, unarmed humanity, dressed in what it had, but carrying what was most precious: the ability to laugh at pain without disrespecting it. Those makeshift costumes weren't just ridiculous. They were emotional shields. They were acts of resilience. And each costume told a story of hope, of love, of honor. And most importantly, of men and women who in the middle of the desert discovered that laughter is also a form of prayer. The tension was absolute. Two platoons positioned on opposite sides of a devastated village, separated by ruins and silence. Any movement would be interpreted as a threat. Hours passed without a shot being fired, but with their fingers firmly on the trigger and fear running down their necks. And then, from the American trench, a sergeant known for his sarcastic remarks picked up the megaphone and shouted, "If you surrender, I promise you barbecue and beer." For a second, only the wind responded. Then, laughter, restrained, muffled, but audible, from the other side. And like an unexpected spark, the laughter spread. It didn't become a ceasefire, but it did become a truce. For a few hours, no one fired. They just listened, breathed, existed. That phrase was not diplomatic, it was human. It was the kind of joke that crosses language, uniform, ideology. There were no soldiers there. There were people. Dirty, tired, scared men, hungry for peace. The commander on the other side responded, shouting, "Only if it's picanha!" And that was when the first informal dialogue was born. With guns still pointed, but with hearts unarmed. No white flag was raised, but everyone knew something was saved in that moment. Humor, when born of respect, lightness, and honesty, has a power that not even artillery has, that of restoring empathy, that of reminding us that behind the uniform, there is a human being. Decades later, two veterans, one from each side, met again at a reconciliation event. One was the sergeant with the megaphone, the other the one who laughed first. They hugged. And one said, "That day you saved me without firing a shot." And the other replied, "You reminded me that I was still a person." Because sometimes the true act of courage is not attacking, it is laughing. It is making room for the unlikely. It is offering kindness where only harshness was expected. And for that reason, that episode became a legend, the joke that prevented gunfire. The truce without a flag, the laughter that crossed trenches and sealed, even if only for a moment, an impossible reconciliation. It was a small notebook with a faded leather cover, hidden at the bottom of the backpack of one of the quietest soldiers in the platoon. No one knew for sure when he started writing it, only that it was always with him. During missions, between rest breaks and moments of silence, he would scribble in it with an old pen, laughing softly. "It's the diary of the comic apocalypse," he would say. But it was much more than just crude jokes. They were living memories, reflections of the absurdity of war, seen through a sharp, sarcastic, and deeply human gaze. The jokes made no sense out of context, and that's exactly why they worked so well inside. The notebook became an internal legend. It was only shown at specific times, as if it were a ritual. During bombings, blackouts, or tense nights of patrol, someone would ask, "Read one from the notebook, go on." and the reading would begin. Jokes about rationing, about the commander with delusions of grandeur, about the soldier who snored, as if he were being tortured. They laughed with tears in their eyes. They even laughed at what hurt. It was a kind of collective therapy, an immediate relief, a way to release tension without losing composure. That soldier, without realizing, it became a silent guardian of everyone's spirit, a guardian of lightness in the midst of madness, a master of empathy and disguised resilience. When he fell in combat, the notebook was found folded in his jacket. The commander, in silence, read a few pages. He cried, he laughed, and decided it needed to be preserved. Today, the notebook is framed in a memorial, next to medals, flags, and photographs. But it is the one that attracts the most visitors, because in that simple object lives something rare, proof that humor saves, that hope can be born from irony. That affection also manifests itself in the twisted words that make us laugh at ourselves, and that the most powerful of war records perhaps is not made of orders or numbers, but of unpublishable jokes that kept men alive inside. It was a routine operation, the kind that the platoon already knew like the back of their hand, until it wasn't anymore. A nearby explosion shattered the formation, and Private Elias, who had just arrived, froze. There, in the middle of the open, exposed terrain, lying amid shrapnel and screams, his eyes fixed on the horizon, he was paralyzed. Nothing made sense. His breathing was fading, his hearing was blurred, and fear took over like an invisible poison. The order was clear: go back now. But he didn't hear. Or if he did, he didn't understand. Frozen by trauma, by the weight of insecurity, he was about to become just another number, until a veteran, a friend of all laughs, ran up to him, crouched down in the middle of the gunfire, and said with the most serious face in the world, "If you die now, I'll have to wash your uniform. And I hate doing laundry." Elias blinked. The absurd, out-of-place phrase, which didn't fit in the chaotic scenario, went straight to his heart, and for an instant, a laugh burst forth, weak, shaky, but alive. It was like pulling the trigger on the humanity that was left in him. He cried, he laughed, and he got up. They came back together, staggering, hugging, still under fire but breathing. After that, no one doubted the power of the right word at the right time. The silly joke, delivered with love and empathy, broke through the shield of trauma and saved a life. And Elias, when asked about the moment, would only say, "It was the stupidest and most beautiful phrase I've ever heard." Because that wasn't humor. It was a touch of soul, a reconnection with the present. At the camp, the episode became history. "Don't freeze or they'll threaten you with washing powder," they said, laughing. But behind the joke, there was reverence, compassion, deep respect for the moment when laughter not only did good, it worked miracles. And this taught the group something that no official training covers. Kindness is a very powerful weapon. When combined with sincerity, it disarms even the war within the mind. Elias remained steadfast, became one of the most respected, and became the first to say something funny in the most tense situations. Because he knew, with a conviction that few carry, the right joke can be the difference between the end and a new beginning. The years passed. The rifles were handed in, the backpacks emptied, the medals put away. The war was over, at least on paper. But there is something that time does not archive: the stories. And among so many memories, what lives most in the reunion circles are not the combats, the shots, or the maps. It is the laughter. At the annual Veterans Get-Together, the topic is never the mission number, but the day the soldier fell asleep, with the radio on, and began to tell his own nightmare out loud, or the time they mistook a camel for an enemy tank. Laughter comes easily, freely, because it carries more than humor. It carries survival, affection, hope. It is the invisible link that unites those who were there, and those who, thanks to laughter, are still here. At the bar table, between toasts and stories told for the 1,000th time, eyes shine, some with longing, others with gratitude, all with humanity. Each joke is a small ceremony, a prayer disguised as laughter, a sacred moment of reconciliation with the past, because laughing at what hurt does not erase the pain, but it shows that it has not won. And children, grandchildren, and curious people who listen from outside often ask, how could you laugh? And the answer is simple but full of wisdom. Because war could take everything from us except our soul, and laughing was the way to say that it was still there. Humor finally became a legacy, not of blood, but of values. And today, in each new group that goes to the front, in each base that is formed, there is always a veteran who, before training, tells a funny story, not out of disrespect but out of altruism, out of love, out of emotional honesty. Because teaching how to shoot is easy. What is difficult is teaching how to laugh after the impact. And when the younger ones laugh, still without understanding it properly, the seed of something eternal is born. Because in the end, the battlefield passes, the uniform retires, the memory fails. But that joke, the one that saved the soul, that remains, like a memory, like an amulet, like a silent certainty that the heroes also laughed. And that, here's why they are still alive inside. And now that you've heard these stories, tell me honestly, when was the last time you used laughter to save someone? Maybe not in a war trench, but who knows? In the silence of a loved one, in the anxiety of a friend, in the darkness of a difficult day. Humor, the kind that comes from compassion, courage, and hope, is one of the purest forms of love, and also one of the most forgotten. Have you underestimated the power of laughter? Maybe it's time to rescue that light, sincere, and deeply human side that you carry inside. Because sometimes a joke can do what no explanation can: touch the soul. Now tell me, what was the most unusual moment in your life when laughter saved the day? Right here in the comments. Your story may inspire someone more than you can imagine. And if you want to continue discovering this invisible side of great stories, this side where humanity shines even in the shadows, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and come with us, because laughing is also resisting.